Scott from Quayle's Brewery. We're a brewery in Oromodonte in Ontario. We've been open for just over 2 years.
Tell us about the beer you made.
Well, this is Distant Sun. It's a New Zealand style pilsner. Nice lager brewed with all New Zealand hops. So this is largely Nelson Sauvin with a little bit of Kohatu and also Nectaron. It's definitely a hop forward beer. Like the Nelson is the big star of the show with all that white wine and melon flavors. I found the Nectaron added like a stone fruit element that it really lacked before. And Kohatu is my New Zealand lager hop. I think it's a derivative of Hallertau Mittelfrüh. So it really adds like the extra lager characters that if you just use Nelson Sauvin, it doesn't really come across very lagery.
Tell us about how the fermentation went.
Yeah, the fermentation went great. Kicked off really quickly. Almost no lag at all. And it fermented out in 6 days, which was 2 days faster than what we predicted. It was 11.5 degrees to start, and then we usually do a temperature rise at 50% fermentation and at 80%. So turned out great. It finished very dry. I think 1.5 Plato was the final gravity. It was probably 87% attenuation on this one, which was very high. I'm not sure if it was like we used a different malt in this as well, but it was, yeah, definitely aggressive.
What would you say are some of the main challenges you have when brewing lagers?
I love brewing lagers, but the biggest challenge is the time constraint. You really want to be able to turn over that tank, especially you always want a lager in the middle of summer, and that's when you have no tank space. So yeah, that was really the big draw card for me for this. If I can turn over a tank a week earlier, then that suddenly opens up a whole world of possibilities for what I can brew in summer.
Increase your annual output, it's pretty big.
No, exactly, it's a big deal. And I mean, obviously, like lagers, there's a lot of attention to detail required. But yeah, I mean, this lager strain is at least one thing I don't have to think about.
Big deal, especially if your bottleneck is in fermentation, which a lot of breweries, that's kind of their bottleneck is in fermentation and tank time.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've kind of built a couple of our core brands on lagers, and already we're feeling the pinch. And you know, having a lager that turns over quicker means we might be able to delay getting more tanks for a couple of years. So.
How does the LalBrew NovaLager compare to those other lager strains that you traditionally use?
Yeah, so the biggest difference I noticed with the NovaLager was how clean it tasted as soon as it had done fermenting. So we tasted it day 7, the attenuation was finished, and it was clean. Like you could taste the hops, you could taste the malt. Usually when you have a sulfury strain, it's almost like a cloud over the beer until that clears up. So, and you need to crash it, you need to start conditioning it. So by the time you actually get the beer finished, you don't really know what you're going to deal with, what you have to deal with until you're 4 weeks in. And then suddenly, if you decide that it doesn't meet your specs, then you have to think about, well, how do we like clean this up? And sometimes that's not easy with a cold beer.
What did you like most about LalBrew NovaLager?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that. It's the the lack of sulfur. So for this beer in particular, we used a lot of hops on the hot side, and because we were able to taste exactly what that hop character was after day 7, we were able to change our dry hop amounts based on that. And in this case, it was actually very hoppy, so we knew that we could pull back the dry hops and still make it kind of a very drinkable beer. We didn't want it to be like an IPA, we wanted this to be very crushable still with just like a nice complementing hop character. Whenever we've used other lager strains in the past, we find that you don't really know what you're getting until after the fact. We made a lager with all Sriracha Ace hops, which was really fun, but we ended up dry hopping it way too much because we didn't think we got much hot side, and then it was just, it was very good, but it was very dilly. So I really like the idea that you know what you're getting as soon as the fermentation's done. You don't have to wait for, that cloud of...
You can potentially correct a lot earlier than you
Yeah,
would. Yeah.
exactly. Even if there's something wrong with the beer, like while it's still warm, you can try and blow anything off, or you can, if I brew my cold lager and I don't like it, I could always dry hop it. Whereas at this point, I don't know where that beer is going to be until like 3-4 weeks in, and it's usually cold crashed and clear, and then you don't want to be adding a ton of hops to it at that point.
And so this is a more like hop forward lager. How do you think the yeast played well with the hops?
Yeah, fantastic. They shine, really. The malt as well. Everything that I put into it, I feel like came straight out. I mean, you know, this is a talk about the yeast, but the yeast is the last thing you really taste in it. It creates that dry finish that you want for a beer to let everything else shine. So,
Would you recommend LalBrew NovaLager to other brewers?
I have already been recommending NovaLager to some of my friends, especially brewers that don't have time for lagers. I find a lot of my friends will still be, they're brewing golden ales because they don't have time to turn over their tanks for lagers. So I've been definitely recommending it to those guys. I think even production breweries that have a core lager strain can benefit from this one. So yeah.
What other styles do you think NovaLager would be well suited for?
That's a really good question. I think it could potentially be used in most lager styles. I can't see any styles that it wouldn't work with. And I particularly like the idea of potentially being a reason to create new lager styles. Things that are more hoppy, more malty. It opens up lagers for people that previously couldn't make lagers. So I think potentially, the most exciting thing would be potentially styles that we don't have yet.
Pushing the envelope on what that traditional lager style has been assumed to be within the North American market.
Exactly. I mean, I love the idea of a cold IPA, but does it make sense financially to make the exact same beer but take longer to do it? So now, absolutely, you can make a cold IPA and it not cost the brewery anymore. So.
Yeah, I mean, NovaLager is all about like turning tanks quicker, absence of off flavors, and just like fast, clean lagers, and also, I mean, pushing the envelope and it's a new tool in the toolbox for brewers to make lagers with. Like, we've had little genetic diversity in lagers for hundreds of years. Now all of a sudden, we've got a lager yeast that can, it's kind of crazy to think of, can go up to 20 degrees Celsius and still be squeaky clean. So.
Or 23.
Right, 23 or 27.
Yeah, and if you have a quick turnaround lager strain, I mean, is there any reason to use like American ales anymore? Because that was always the reason American ales kind of dominated lagers. It was mostly because of that turnaround time and the clarity, and I think it was much less to do with, like, obviously people always liked lagers. It was just not financial. It didn't make sense financially. So I think, honestly, like the potential for lagers in the craft beer industry is now opening right up.
I mean, your ROI, if you're looking at it annually, if you're moving a core brand a week earlier, if your backlog is in fermentation, that's a huge potential increased earning annually. Even just freeing up that tank if you wanted to run another brand at the same time.
100%. And I mean, this is a 3-week beer because we dry hopped it and we were still waiting for it to clear up a little bit. But I mean, if you're not dry hopping it and like you're not afraid of it being a little bit hazy, how quickly can you turn these over?
Right. Yeah. There's Brewery out east. They did a trial in a somewhat bold way. They took one of their, it's a like large regional craft brewery out east, and they took one of their core brand lagers and just did a full-size batch, just swapped out the yeast. And I was like, ooh, I really hope it works. But
I'm not ready for that.
And they did it at a higher temperature than they would normally do. Is like, wow, they like really trust us. I hope this works. And then it came out super clean and super fast. They were able to shave. They normally brew, I think they said they normally ferment in 7 days, but they did this one in 6, or maybe it was 8 and 7. But it was shaved 1 day off fermentation, which is cool. But then the big difference for them was they normally condition their lager for a month, and they were able to shave 2.5 weeks off of that. So that's a huge difference. I mean, I don't know how many times they're brewing that lager, but I mean, if you shave 2.5 weeks off of every batch of one of your core brands, that's
substantial.
Twice as much tank space that year. That's incredible. Yeah, I can't wait to start playing around with it. I think this winter we'll get into the trials, get pretty deep in the trials, and see if we can work it into our regular lineup. So,
Cheers.